bird on a tree. I'm just sitting here. I got time.
Efosa has arrived.
It's clear to see.
Hello, Efosa.
From up here,
Hello.
the world seems small. We
Let
can
me see,
sit
Efosa.
together. It's so beautiful. You and
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm glad to be speaking to you through this medium this evening on a very important topic that has become very relevant given the happenings globally and even in my local environment in Nigeria and of course the African continent. First, let me tell you a little about me. My name is Efosa Kenneth Oghagbon. I'm a Nigerian, a medical practitioner who specializes in chemical pathology and metabolism. I work presently for the Benue State University in Nigeria, the College of Health Sciences, and I'm also the chief consultant chemical pathologist at the Benue State University Teaching Hospital. Yes, everybody may have some knowledge about Nigeria. It's a very vast country. Population is close to 200 million at the moment. And like it is globally, we also are sorted by the COVID virus, even though we have not reached the levels experienced prior by certain part of Europe, United States of America, even China and Brazil. But it's becoming a very serious matter, and therefore I'm very glad to be joining this wonderful team led by Lydia, who I've known for over 10 years, actually close to 15 years. I first met Lydia in 2007, and since then we have had very useful collaborative research works, and I'm very glad to be associated with her. She has shown very wonderful understanding of issues of North-South divide in terms of research and scholarly activities, particularly in developing countries like mine where I practice. And my area of primary interest is not death, as I will be talking about in this presentation. My research interest essentially is in lipids, lipids in hypertension, lipid in diabetes, and of course recently have chosen to work in the area of nutrition immunology. But myself and Lydia have recently done a beautiful work where we looked at diabetes and dementia, and we were able to see what the gender impact in Nigerians are. So therefore, my area of work is essentially to see how I can understand the biology of diseases, try to prevent them, and make sure death don't occur, even though I'm sure death is a global phenomenon that must occur. But now I will be talking about death and the mourning process in Africa, especially during this time of COVID-19, which I'm sure a lot of us are very conversant with, particularly those of us in healthcare, in public health, and even in policy making and government. I will take the team through the slides that I have prepared, where I try to look at the perspective of Africans and Africa. I try to look at the different ways we see death and the rights that are associated with death. I will also look at the impact so much death and the fear of death is having presently on the people. And particularly, I'll be looking at the impact of misunderstanding between the people, healthcare workers, policymakers, and even government in relation to practices that have been entrenched in society, in culture. And this brings an additional burden on healthcare workers, on the bereaved, in a manner that we need to understand it and see whether we can bring science to traditional practices in a way that both of them can coexist and we'll be able to make less the trauma that COVID-19 has impacted on our communities.
Hello, Efosa, welcome. Hola, Efosa. Bienvenido, welcome. We had the chance. How are you? We just saw some videos from the Michael Children's Unit. Hemos visto algunos vídeos de la unidad de emergencias. And we were now talking with Ismael also about, and so we had some conversation about how his lives for according to African culture and sobre la cultura africana, and we were now discussing a little bit about what's happening on with coronavirus in the United States. Y estábamos hablando también de qué estaba pasando con el coronavirus en Estados Unidos, ¿no? And how they get in contact with the families, relatives in Nigeria. And, so, y cómo estábamos viviendo, cómo estaba estableciendo la relación con los familiares que tienen en Nigeria. So, thank you, Yunusa, for this warm welcome and providing this personal and professional point of view on the current situation. So,
thank you.
Thank you, Ismael. So, Efosa, do you want to? How do you want to move now? I'm doing translation in the chat, so you can do it in English. Just try to go slow, so I have a time to type every sentence. So every sentence you say it, and so I will be like this because I will just be listening and chatting the message in Spanish. Okay. So feel free, please.
Okay, I'll be as slow as possible for your speed of typing. Again, like I had mentioned before, I want to thank you for this topic. It's not a usual topic for us in the hospital to be talking about death, because we think we can delay death, we can save people from dying. Meanwhile, death is a very important topic for the world over. So for that reason, I think it's important we're talking about it now, particularly because it is a very prominent part of COVID-19.
This one?
Now, yeah, the picture you're looking at is actually a very prominent site in Makurdi, in Benue State. Makurdi is in what we call the middle belt of Nigeria. Essentially, Nigeria is divided to the north, the middle belt, and the south. Benue State is in the middle belt, and Makurdi is the capital city. There's a big river across the city, and you can't come into Makurdi without going over the bridge that you're looking at. We call it the River Benue Bridge in Makurdi. Next slide.
Sorry, because if I share, I cannot have a chat, but it doesn't matter. Okay.
Next slide, please. Yes. These are my two institutions that I'm affiliated with. On the left side of the screen is my College of Health Sciences, which is part of the Benue State University. And on the right these are the gates. On the right is the gate of the Benue State University Teaching Hospital. I'm primarily with the university and I consult for the teaching hospital. Next slide. Here is just again to emphasize that the discussion of death and mourning in Africa in times of COVID-19 couldn't have come at a better time, particularly because on the African continent, the perception of death and of course the associated processes of mourning, burial rites are a little bit unique. And most times there's usually conflict with health institutions, healthcare workers, and policymakers. So I think this discussion is very right to be doing at this point. Next slide. It will look as if these cranium skeletons are smiling, just like the lady in the middle. It is because death is what all humans must come to at one point or the other. In Africa, death is usually expected to occur at a very advanced age. And so when it happens much earlier, people get very worried and they think it is not normal. In biology, for example, we say we start to die the day we are born. Again, emphasizing that death is a commonality to human existence. But there are certain spiritual connections and beliefs of men, even in Africa and Europe and America, that speaks to death as the ultimate end of every physical existence. And again, what is common all over the world is that once death occurs, there will be feeling of loss, there will be pain, there will be anxiety, there will be grief, and of course, these feelings may differ, or the expression of these feelings may differ from place to place. In terms of how much grief some people will express, the manner in which they express it, the processes of mourning may differ from place to place. And again, the burial rites are things that very, very prominent in Africa, which we inform a lot of our discussions today. Next slide. Like I said before, physiologically speaking, we say death is when all the functions of the human body stop to manifest. In the hospital, you want to check the pulse rate, you want to check the pupillary dilatation, whether it's fixed, you want to make sure that there's no chest excursion and all that. These are things we deal with in the hospital. But the process of managing the dying and the dead are issues that needs to be discussed, because there is a difference, or there are differences that you will experience from place to place. And the problems that usually happens in pandemic or in epidemics, giving examples that we have seen in parts of West Africa, is how there is usually a conflict between healthcare workers, government, policymakers, functionaries, in terms of how the people, the loved ones of those who are dying and those who die, how they're allowed to deal with the grieving process and the mourning process. And the emphasis that I want to put here is that it is very possible for public health institutions to recognize this very important human expression of death or management of the dying process, so that they do not find the reaction of the community as if the community is not cooperating. Because it's the same way the community thinks the healthcare workers or those who manage the process are not cooperating with them, because for those in Africa, we do not see death as an end to itself. Rather, death is supposed to be a transition from the physical to the spiritual existence. And because of that, there are processes that wants to be put in place from the stage of dying to death, burial, and all that. And once you now deny them, like we are seeing now, access to the dying and the dead, usually that begins the confusion, the misunderstanding between the loved ones of patients who are dying or that are dead. And we think that if we're able to manage these two sides, that will begin the process of better understanding of what is going on. If you look at presently, the global situation of COVID-19 is quite worrisome. This was the statistics about 3 days ago, and it says over 7 million people have been affected. And of course, that has gone up now, with over 400,000 deaths, which is quite significant. The next slide will look at what happened in certain regions of the globe. Next slide, lady. In Africa, about the same time that I got the data for the global COVID prevalence, in Africa it was just 197,000 confirmed cases of COVID, and about less than 6,000 of them have been recorded to have died from the disease, which is quite a huge difference from what we presently find in Europe and America. India yesterday was said to be witnessing very high number of cases of COVID-19 and death. And some people think that Africa may become the next epicenter. We are not sure if that is going to happen, but what is clear is that if you look at this graph, there is a very steep not so steep, but you can see the gradual, all of a sudden, a steep rise in the number of confirmed cases. We do not know at what point we are on this curve, whether we are still ascending or we've reached the peak, but time will tell. But one thing is sure, COVID will be a major problem in Africa in the next few days, if not months, as the case may be. Next slide. One of the reasons that some people think may be responsible for the lower number of deaths in Africa is the mean age of the population. This slide speaks to the number of elderly persons in Africa compared to some other parts of the world. And that is one factor that may be responsible, because if you know, old age is a risk factor for severe COVID disease, in addition to some other problems like diabetes, which again has a prevalence in Africa that is lower than what you find in other parts of the world. Even in Africa, it is higher in the northern part, and that may possibly explain, the number of deaths that is being recorded in places like Egypt, Algeria. In the south of Africa, yes, the prevalence of diabetes is always higher than you'll find in West Africa. So we are thinking that apart from age, lower mean age of the population, prevalence of diabetes, and some other things that we need to properly tease out as time goes on, may be responsible for the presently seemingly low prevalence of death in Africa. Next slide. This again just speaks to about the same thing. If you look at the figure in Africa, which I had referred to before, we'll see that it's low compared to the other regions of the world. Next slide. Now, this is looking at the way Africans generally look at human existence. It is said to, human beings are said to exist in three selfhood. Number one is spiritual selfhood. The second one is the social or experiential selfhood, and of course the ancestral selfhood. Because most African communities believe in reincarnation, it is said that the spiritual selfhood is usually from the time of reincarnation, of course, to conception and delivery of the babies, or conception of the unborn child. I would say that is the spiritual selfhood stage. And once this baby or the person is born, the social or the experiential selfhood stage starts, which is essentially from the time the child is born up to death. Of course, will experience life as it were. And after that, after death begins the ancestral selfhood stage, which is underlining African perception of death, which is to say that it's only a transition from one stage to the next. Of course, from death to what we call the living dead, or better still referred to as the stage of ancestors. This transition stage, this belief in this transition underlies a lot of the burial rites we will talk about as time goes on, because it is thought that these rites contribute to the smooth ride, so to speak, of the dead to the ancestral stage. And therefore, once people don't understand this and they do not allow the rites to progress as the community expects, it is thought that the living dead may actually not join the ancestors, may just be hovering around as ghosts or as disturbed spirits, and some people fear that this may come back to haunt them. Next slide. There's no doubt that COVID-19 has had very significant impact on the globe, on humanity. The impact spans from high health costs. For countries that can afford it, it's cost them so much. A few days ago, the United Kingdom said COVID-19 has caused them both health and socioeconomic costs of about $300 billion. It has a huge political cost, counter-accusation between, is it China, is it America, and all that. And this is also affecting country-to-country relationship and all that. But what we are mostly interested in today is the cultural impact of COVID-19. This impact, especially as it affects the norms in dying, death, and burial processes in Africa. And we're actually paying much attention to this today because my thinking is, if we're able to properly adapt these rituals, mourning processes of dying and death in Africa to policies that are geared towards managing the disease, it will reduce the frictions that we have seen in certain communities in regards to the position of healthcare workers, policy makers vis-a-vis the community members and families of bereaved individuals. Next slide. This picture is just showing the environment in some, mostly rural Africa, and the impact on these people is huge. And of course, the impact also on the healthcare workers is also huge. The typical gowning you will find in Europe and America will be a complete personal protective equipment. And what we are seeing here, of course, this is not complete, but yet they still have to do their jobs. Next slide, please. One of the complications that may occur, that's the reason I put this slide here, is when communities, families of the dead are unable to observe some of their cultural expectations in terms of managing the dying process, death process in terms of processing the dead for ancestral world, is that some of them may take the stress a little bit further than is expected. And we say this person has developed complicated grief. And most times it is actually as a matter of either because the nature of death was quite very traumatic and the bereaved is reacting a little bit out of proportion, or because they were not able to say their goodbyes and feel guilty one way or the other. Or it may be because of the environment in which this is taking place. For example, the COVID environment now means that sometimes relations, family members, loved ones may not be able to see their ward or their family members who are sick, dying, or maybe there may be other things concerning financial costs, because some burials in Africa are quite expensive and unexpected. This may contribute to complicated grief, and of course there may be issues of pre-existing social factors. What this slide is here for is to show that if certain deaths are not well managed during the COVID-19, you may actually have family members who develop complicated grief. And the earlier the system understands some of these problems, the better we can reduce some of these complications, the better we can allow a proper alloy between healthcare workers, communities, so that we can reduce rumors, we can reduce fears, and we can allow information to seep down to community and be properly assimilated for reduced transmission and support of government. Next slide. This is nothing different from what we're saying, but except that burial and funerals essentially connect the dead and its socio-cultural networks. Otherwise, if they are not allowed to happen, there will be a lot of repercussions in terms of social and spiritual conditions for families and communities. Therefore, we think that my thinking is that the rituals must be allowed to continue, so that the African will not feel so disconnected from their culture, will not feel so responsible for their aged ones or their family members who dies not getting their fulfillment in the ancestral world. It's exactly similar to what we were talking about before. Next slide. Now, these are some of the rituals that we talk about in Africa, in different places. These are the common ones. For example, there is a tribe in Kenya, I think the Nandi or Nandu tribe in Kenya. Once a relation is very sick and they are very sure that relation will not survive, even before death, the person is taken to the wild and left to the elements of the wild, including hyenas, to devour. But if peradventure he finally becomes well, he returns back home. It's similar to a tribe, I think in India, that leaves the dead to consumption by a certain species of vultures. But in most of parts of Africa, this necessarily does not happen. In fact, the dead has to be interred, which is to be put into the ground using a coffin, essentially, except for the Muslims who don't do that. And of course, allowing all the other engagement. But for the specific that are common, particularly in Nigeria, the family wants to shave particularly the pubic hair of the dead, because it is thought that a child is born without pubic hair, and so if he's going back to the great beyond, that shouldn't go. If it goes with the pubic hair, it looks as if it's been unhygienic. And so they do hair shaving as part of the culture. Of course, a lot of animals are killed because there are so many parties that will be done. It is thought that the louder the music, the more the party, if you call it party, those who come for the ceremony, the better is the experience of joining of the dead to the ancestral world. Another ritual is the wife of the dead person will have to wear black dress for a period of time. In fact, once it is dark, she's not expected to go out alone. It is thought that the late husband may want to take her along to the spirit world. If he has to go out at all, there has to be a member of the family, preferably the brother of the late husband. In the same vein, the widower cannot marry for a certain period of time as part of the mourning process. And usually there is a wake-keep, particularly night vigil that is done. It is thought that this experience helps the singing and the dancing with the corpse lying in state in the house, helps in ushering that spirit to the great beyond, and helps with proper management of the transition process. Now, one of the things, that's why this topic is important to me, is that it is possible to adapt all of these in a safe manner. For example, I know in my own tribe, night vigil used to go on for like 3 or 4 nights in a week. It came to a time when night vigil with so many people coming around will constitute some security hazard. And the community got together and said, must the vigil necessarily be night vigil? And people agreed, and now they do that during the evenings, afternoon/stroke evenings. And everybody accepted, and that is what is being done now. Therefore, all of these rights can either be adapted, alternative created, or safety procedures are put into it so that they do not constitute a risk to family members or the community. Next slide. There is also the cleansing rites. A lot of people will have heard of that the dead body must be washed. It is thought that that washing is not just physical washing in terms of removing dirt from the body. It is thought that, no, the slide before, yes, please. It is thought that the washing helps to cleanse the dead of wrongdoings so that ascension to the ancestral world will be seamless, will not be inhibited by the wrongs that were done while he was alive. In some parts, you have liberation rights, particularly when you're dealing with so-called very important personalities like chiefs and kings. These liberations are done to also help in the proper ascension of the dead to the ancestral world. This is very prominent among the Igbos of Nigeria. You also have the ritual dance. It is done to usher the dead to the great beyond. It is done here, but it is believed that while that is done, some other previous ancestors are also around and are witness to all of this, and so they will allow the ascension of the new dead who has become a new ancestors into their community. Next slide. Now, the way COVID-19 is presently being managed in most of Africa, not unlikely due to the fear at the initial time, the confusing information from global head bodies. It was such that there was absolute denial of access to the sick, even if it wasn't even confirmed. And when they died, bodies were taken away without families knowing about it. And there are a lot of uncomfortable impact that this has caused to the dying and the dead in Africa. And they include patients dying very lonely. Family members will feel very guilty, not being able to, afford. I call the dying some consolation, some comfort. Again, in Africa, where the healthcare infrastructure is quite ineffective because of funding, we all know that the funding capacity in Africa is very low. So mortality may be high, and therefore hospital morgues will be overwhelmed. And when that happens, processing of the dead in terms of cleansing and all that may suffer. Family members will feel responsible for such treatment of the dead. And this is in the face of uncertain posthumous transmission of the virus. Up to now, no clear science has indicated that transmission of the virus after death is present. And that is an aspect that needs to be tidied out. If that is so, therefore, some of the actions presently taken may have been done in error. Because of the need for physical distancing, it means if the dead is even allowed to be buried by the family, not too many people will come there. And like I said before, the number of persons, the amount of song, singing, dancing is seen as a factor in the consideration of the position of the dead once become an ancestor. In some cases, like I said before, burials are not even allowed at all. Therefore, the families are going to be in turmoil, knowing that they haven't done what they're supposed to do. And all of these, of course, will cause very profound psychosocial and cultural troubles for families and the community. Next slide. What are the impacts of all of this? Not being able to say goodbye means that some may develop complicated grief, some will have very shattered emotions, and all of this will cause maybe some mental torture for family members. When you change the rites normally done during burial, you deny them ability to perform those rites, there will be a sense of very, very severe sense of loss. There may be desperation, and some people will find it difficult to accept that there was a loss because they've not been able to do that which is proper, particularly if they have not been able to see the dead body at all. Okay? When some people cannot prove that death occurred, they didn't see the body, they couldn't process the body, this creates a lot of ambiguous loss in some families and communities. And of course, when loss experience is unverified, because the patient was taken, a relation was taken out of the house, went to the hospital, and is said to have died and buried by government agencies, it means that some family members may not take this very kindly. Grieving process may be frozen, and this is not good for humanities because there is a need for humans to get some sense of meaning of life. They want to get some connection to the dead, and all of this is denied them. This has been shown to create a lot of pandemonium in communities. In the past, in Ebola, outbreak in, I think it's Sierra Leone and in Ivory Coast, it was shown that the mere request for there to be physical distancing like we're doing now compounded the grief, loss, and distress of family members. I'm not advocating that that is not important to be done, but what I'm saying is that it is possible to ensure that physical distancing takes place. It is also possible to ensure that some of these rights are allowed to go on without necessarily compromising the burial rights and compromising health and safety measures during this time. In fact, it's been shown during the Ebola outbreak that some of these things actually have helped to reduce transmission if properly done. The absence of known burial rights has been known to cause very severe psychological consequences that have been fed before, and therefore it is possible to design alternatives. However, alternatives to establish burial rights in Africa must be done in consonance with family members, and they must accept it. My suggestion is that you can actually throw the option to design those alternatives to the communities or the families, and you just act like a facilitator to get exactly what you think is safe and what you think is good for everybody concerned. Next slide, Lydia. Now, what can we do in terms of looking at what is available locally to modulate dying and death rituals? My thinking is that we can work with the communities, family members, particularly communities, because most of these rituals are rituals established by communities. Can work with them to agree on what we think are alternative rights. Now, for example, if shaving must be done, the community can be assured that shaving will be done by proxy if you cannot guarantee safety of the family members to do it. And you can use technology, either show video pictures to, if they agree with you, to confirm that shaving was done. Washing or cleansing of the dead bodies can also be done either by equipping the family members with the right tools. Like it's shown in one of the slides below, France did that by providing personal protective equipment for family members and ensuring that proper health protocols were established so that they can feel connected to the dead. Now, people are usually very adaptable to changes if they understand the necessity for it, particularly if it's only going to be temporary for the period of the pandemic. But the problem is not to consider it at all or not to take them into cognizance when you're making decisions on their behalf. The means of communication and dissemination of these alternatives must be appropriate and specific to cultural context. What is feasible in another continent may not be feasible in Africa, and what is feasible in one country in Africa may not be feasible in another country. Therefore, the alternatives that you're designing and the means you're putting it to them must be appropriate for the culture. If you need to speak to community leaders to get the result down, do that. Identify opinion leaders in the community, identify people who the community respects, and make this suggestion to them so that the suggestions are well taken and effective for preventing transmission of transmission of the disease to family members or community. And of course, like I said before, you must involve the wider community in alternative formulation so that it is a community, so to speak, led solution, and everybody will follow. Next slide. And some of the things I think how we can adapt the mourning and burial practices during COVID-19 in Africa. I've said something similar before. Number one, we can make provision for family members to wear some PPE to be able to see, confirm death of a family member, perform some of the rites we spoke about, or we can use technology as a proxy to make sure that they're able to see. For example, in Europe and America, a lot of family members were kept informed of the state of their family by telephone calls, by video calls, and all that. And those things, to the extent that is available in Africa, can be utilized. It's just to get the people connected to their family members when they are dying, not to feel as if the person was abandoned and guilt is now the repercussion for families. We can also advocate safe burial practices, which are symbolic and meet the emotional needs of the bereaved. And this can be done, in the same manner of deciding what is appropriate, what can be done, and what alternatives can also be utilized. Family members must be involved along with the communities in the formulation of these proposed changes. Like I said, as long as it is temporary, they won't have a problem with it. It is left for them to make them permanent, because we've had Ebola epidemic, we've had Lassa fever epidemic all in Africa. Yellow fever is down. There will be another epidemic or pandemic in the future. It's COVID today. We don't know what it is tomorrow. Therefore, the earlier we begin to make sure these become standard practices, common practices, the better. Because SARS was just about a few years ago, the MERS, and now we're talking about COVID. In the next 10 years, we don't know what we'll be dealing with. If possible, during this dying stage or even at death, depending on the spiritual connotation of families and community, you can allow local spiritual leaders to have some limited access to the dying, and this can give succor to family members. You can safeguard religious freedom and incorporate spiritual and cultural values of the communities, because some of these values are the things that will give succor to family members. There are things that they believe once done will create a smooth ascension of the dead to the ancestor stage. And these communities sometimes believe that if they have members of their family as ancestors, as living dead or spirits, they are able to benefit in terms of protection of their lives and property sometimes. In fact, in some communities, they think that their ancestors intercede on their behalf, even when it comes to rainfall and some other profitable or beneficial weather changes. Therefore, these are very serious beliefs among the people, and it is difficult to take it off them in one fell swoop. Next slide. It's also continuing what you can do. When customary gatherings are disallowed, you can let mourners explore alternatives. We've talked about this before. Alternatives can also be devised for the rites that I mentioned before: shaving, washing, dressing of the dead. You can ask them to bring the cloth they want the dead to be dressed in. Once they bring the cloth, if you are afraid of transmission, you can disinfect the cloth and wear the cloth on the corpse and let them see it. If they are not there in person, you can use video technology or pictures, and that will give them some relief. Engage the family members as soon as possible for psychological support, not getting back to them very late, and they will think that something must have gone amiss, they could have done something better. Therefore, it would be nice if family members are contacted early enough in the dying process before their ward or family member actually dies. Families should not be under any pressure whatsoever to explore alternatives, all right? Because once they get the sense that they are forced to do it, it almost defeats the purpose. Like I said before, you can facilitate it, get them to buy into the ideas and possibly even own the ideas. That way they are able to propagate such alternatives in other communities, which is better for everybody. Next slide. Next slide, please. These are the concerns of the dead being very infectious during COVID-19 actually created most of the hue and cry and the fears of health workers and policies that may have backfired. But this slide is speaking to the fact that you can actually manage those concerns. We've talked about how you can manage the rights of washing, dressing, and all that. International guidelines, like I said before, have not really shown that there is very serious risk of posthumous transmission. Therefore, it is better not to err now, so that you don't incur the non-agreement of communities in the future. There are people are afraid that virus may survive on clothes after death. Those clothes can be disinfected. Family members may want to have access to those clothes, disinfect them, autoclave them, and return them, so that they are not seen as being unlucky to have had a family member suffer from COVID. Like I said before, if they have clothes that they want their dead to wear, please get those clothes. If for your own safety as a healthcare worker, you can disinfect them and wear them on their family members. I referred earlier on that CDC in Europe, I think in Italy in particular, provided PPE so that family members can see their families that are dying or the ones that are dead. We can also ensure, using technology, to make sure families see their dying relation. Once it's dead, they can also be able to view the disease if it is absolutely impossible for you to let them have access to it. That way, they will verify death has occurred, and they can start to adapt to it. In Ebola epidemics, like I mentioned before, the fact that families were not able to see the face of the dead led to a lot of confusion, such that there was delay in their emotional closure. And of course, it made sure that they found it very difficult to comply with government and policy makers' guidelines on health and safety. Therefore, it's very important that communities are taken along and, as best as possible, create, if not exactly their right, create something similar to the rights that they are accustomed to. Next slide. This is it's not a slide I got in Africa. Obviously, this is a slide of the burial of a Muslim patient. And as much as possible, family members were allowed to be present. They were clad in personal protective equipment, and these family members will easily have closure to the loss of a loved one. In some environment, some few talks are going on in Africa, which I think may create problems for communities if not properly handled. The issue of mandatory cremation. This should be very carefully discussed before implemented, because, like I said, it is believed that the dead body must be buried because it's only going to transit from dead to the living dead and become an ancestor. In fact, in some communities in Africa, in Nigeria even, they go ahead and do what they call their very local post-mortem. The thinking is that if the dead person died, if the person died with, say, a cancer of the liver, even in those who live in the hinterland, they know what a normal liver feels like. They do an incision, they check the organs in the intestine, and the ones they feel don't look normal, they take them out. The belief is that the person must not be buried with that diseased part of the body, otherwise it's going to come back with it. All right? So to accept cremation in Africa by the very local people will take a lot of discussion. And so if government goes ahead unilaterally and impose such things, they will only create more difficulty with the people in terms of compliance and obeying safety guidelines. So these are things that I think should be carefully discussed in Africa. Of course, it's a common practice in Europe and America, but given the belief of the dying and the dead in Africa, and the fact that they expect these people to become ancestors or living dead, cremation may be something they will have a long discussion to consider. Next slide. This is essentially have been inferred all along. I'm just saying here that if we include certain health and safety practices in African burial rituals during contagion, you are able to, as much as possible, create a quasi traditional burial that have a semblance of what is traditionally done, so that the dead can go ahead to ascend to the great beyond and still be a guide or a protector of family members, and everybody is happy. There is closure, there is peace in the community. This is essentially what this slide is speaking to. Next slide. In summary, there are evidence, particularly during the last Ebola, that African communities can adapt to changes in the processes of caring for the dying and the dead during contagions. Therefore, all that is needed is for policymakers, healthcare professionals, and those who make the rules to ensure that there are certain measures that are put in place very early enough with the right information, involvement of the community, so that healthcare workers will get the maximum compassion from these communities. And once that is done, the issue of transmission of disease, diagnosis of the disease, identification of contacts and tracing them, and getting their cooperation to be put to care will become very easy for African communities. And by so doing, the community will enjoy peace with both the living and the dead, if all of this is done in a harmonious manner. There will be challenges for people who do not understand it, but with the right discussion and right understanding of the local expectations of the people, with the right resources, it doesn't have to be very expensive. It is possible that we can manage contagion even by ensuring that burial rights are respected and the people are not treated as if their culture means nothing. By so doing, it will be possible to deal with future contagions, even now of dealing with COVID-19 in Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Efosa. I think you have given us a very deep conceptualization. Le agradezco porque nos ha ofrecido una conceptualización muy profunda. And I will open the questions, abriré las preguntas. Os abriré el chat por si las queréis hacer, o si no me las ponéis por... O sea, abriré los micros y si no las hacéis por el chat. He visto que ha habido algunos comentarios de Sara y Patricia. Podéis preguntar quizás directamente, o si no, preguntáis por el chat y yo traduzco como queráis. I was inviting people to make questions. I see that Sarah and Patricia already had some small comments at the beginning. I was just writing down two things that for me were completely new. Voy a hacer solamente primero dos comentarios que para mí han sido muy nuevos, que no los tenía presentes. The first one is when the people that they are buried, that are in the crematory, that they remove the organs that are ill, so the spirit doesn't go to heaven, let's say, or wherever, to be an ancestor without the illness. So this is something we have no idea, so nobody here knows about it. O sea, y nadie sabe que cuando un muerto se muere, según algunas tradiciones de algunas zonas africanas, por ejemplo, a la persona fallecida hay que, si tenía un problema en el hígado, hay que abrir, hay que sacar el hígado que estaba enfermo y hay que enterrarlo sin esa parte enferma, porque esa persona tiene que volver a renacer sin llevarse la enfermedad a cuestas. Entonces se les limpia, ¿no? Un poco. Entonces esto, por ejemplo, yo no tenía ni idea, ¿no? Eso es algo que es muy trascendental, ¿no? La segunda cosa trascendental que me ha gustado, bueno, y entonces por eso la parte de quemar tampoco no está bien considerada, porque representa que no hay ni siquiera esa oportunidad, ¿no? The second thing I write down as a sentence that is critical, and most of us we will agree because it's very, but it's something that is in a sentence is very deep. una frase que ha dicho que todos estamos de acuerdo, pero que como frase la primera vez que la oigo es esta, ¿no? Que estamos haciendo como si la cultura no importara para nada. We are working in a way like you say, like culture doesn't mean anything. This is terrible, it's very deep. Because we are doing our best, but we are making like culture doesn't mean anything. ¿No? Estamos haciendo todo lo que podemos, pero estamos asumiendo que la diversidad cultural no tiene lugar y por tanto estamos haciendo como sociedad algo que sí que es impensable, que es como si la cultura no supiera para nada, o sea, ¿no? El concepto cultura, ¿no? I think this is very deep. I think very deep. I think that this is going to be your contribution as an opinion to the topic, Efosa. Va a ser tu opinión, porque tengo que hacer una opinión, because this contextual frame is very deep. Este entorno, ¿no?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, I think.
I agree with you. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have the recording, so I will do the video, but with the recording, you have, I think, a lot of, probably the slices were part of your contribution, I guess, because there was a lot of information. Es que como vamos a hacer cada uno una opinión, hay muchas personas que están dando opiniones, lo que le decía es que imaginaba, sospechaba que las diapositivas que he hecho ha despiezado la opinión que va a enviar a la revista, porque se nota que está muy trabajada con datos epidemiológicos, etcétera, ¿no? Y que le digo que con el discurso que ha hecho, casi muchas veces nos sale más fluido cuando hablamos que cuando escribimos, ¿no? Que digo que tenía el audio para luego para poderlo repasar y alguna idea a lo mejor nueva que ha salido. Let me see if there are questions because I saw somebody was writing. A ver, está aquí Patricia, luego Sara y luego Patricia. Sí, a ver, Patricia comentaba, economía, techo, a ver, Patricia comentaba, economía significa comer, techo, salud, quiere decir, y luego está la salud, y por tanto están interrelacionadas porque forman parte de la vida. Entonces, claro, en la disyuntiva de que en África se está pidiendo a las personas que escojan entre vida o vida, o sea, entre economía o salud, es que conceptualmente las dos son lo mismo. Es un tipo de vida, ¿no? No sé, Patricia, ¿la quieres formular tú? Yo la formulo otra vez y así a nivel castellano también. No, exprésala en castellano y así yo la formulo un poquito más profunda.
Yo creo que dos puntualizaciones en este sentido. Tengo que pedir, o sea, esta disyuntiva de economía o salud, creo que es una mala formulación. Porque
She's saying that the question about being to choose between economy and health is what the government asks, but it's not possible. It's a bad formulation of a question because both of them are life are together in life.
Sí, por este sentido que creo que es importante tomar conciencia de esto, porque te ponen una disyuntiva que es imposible tomar una cosa u otra. Entonces, yo creo que es una formulación hecha, yo digo, con mala intención o con un punto de manipulación que fácilmente podemos caer en ello. Porque la economía lo relacionamos con el concepto dinero. Y yo creo que la economía, lo que sí que creo que tiene que cambiar es el sistema que lleva esa economía. Pero la economía en sí es vida, es que no hay otra. Es un poco la sensación. Y después también quería hacer una puntualización con el tema de la cultura.
Pero acá, ¿le acabo esta pregunta que has hecho? Sí, perdona. She says that it's not it's not one thing or another, they are together, and when the question goes into the population from the governments or whatever, it looks for her like it's like a kind of manipulation, that they are trying to ask you to choose when you have nothing to choose because it's the same thing. So she's very concerned that we have to be very aware that the question is not a question, it's not a real question, it's a kind of, so it's clear for us as a population that it's the same thing. So it's like a question that has like other intentions. Perdona, sí, Patricia.
Sí, y simplemente también con el tema de la cultura, yo creo que es decir, a veces nos ponemos en polaridades, ¿no? O la seguimos ciegamente o renegamos de ella. Yo creo que cuestionarla, cultura como también yo metería el tema de creencias, ¿eh? Entonces creo que está bien cuestionarla y es posible que necesite una adaptación ¿no? A la nueva generación, al nuevo momento, pero creo que mucho lo que hacemos es que o la seguimos ciegamente, no la cuestionamos, o renegamos, ¿no? Creo que falta quizá más pensamiento reflexivo en cuanto a todas las culturas, creo, ¿eh?
He says that when we talk about culture, usually we do a very polarized opinion. We either follow it like blinds, 100% what culture says, and we can do even the opposite. I mean, just forgetting about that culture. And for her, the most important question is that at a certain time, certain situations, we have to question what is culture, and so that it's adaptive. And that is a good exercise. But of course, the two polarities is going to be a problem for all of us. But we have to question about culture in these moments, probably because it has to adapt to different nuances of to be more useful.
Gracias.
Thank you. Thanks.
No, I agree with her completely. The issue of culture vis-a-vis health and economy pops up every day. The problem is, I think certain people do not quite appreciate the import of culture to some other persons. If you have a better opinion about their cultural practice and is properly presented in a manner that allows for the community or the people to digest on it, sometimes they accept. I give you an example. In my tribe, before now, about as recent as about maybe 45, 50 years ago, if the king dies, because these were kings who were very powerful, they had the lineage of having servants and slaves and all that. And when they die, they are buried along with some members of their household, like the slaves or the servants. The thinking is the king is going to be a king in the ancestral land, and once he becomes an ancestor, the king is going to need servants over there. And so once you're burying the king, you also have to kill some of the servants and bury them together. But about 50 years ago, when there was a coronation of a new king, and he said, because before then, it had happened 40 years before, and he said the world has gone so advanced that this kind of practice can no longer hold sway. And so what they did was to meet with the elders of the community and said, we have to do certain things to make sure that we change from that practice. The point I'm making is, once a particular culture or practice is not in consonance with modern day life, it actually has more risk than benefit. The discussion must be had with the community to effect change. Otherwise, they will misunderstand all the good intentions of trying to introduce something new. What you think is good for you maybe, it may not be good for them. But there's a way you can possibly make them through a process of engagement, and they will understand that, okay, this may have been relevant in the time past, not now. But it's not something you do all of a sudden while somebody is going through grief, going through a lot of pain and loss, and you expect them to suddenly lose again their culture all at once. It's a discussion that is very sensitive, and it must be properly handled over a long time to effect changes that are beneficial to communities.
Bueno, parece bien.
see. Sarah, do you want to? Sarah, do you want to? I think you can open yourself. Puedes abrirte tú misma.
Sí, Lidia, ¿le puedes preguntar, traduce por favor,
Sí.
¿cuáles serían aquellos elementos de resistencia que considera que permiten que una persona en su cultura sobreviva a la adversidad? ¿Cómo resisten? ¿Cuáles son los elementos?
Sarah asks, which are the elements that makes that somebody in your culture will be resistant in front of adversity? Which are the elements of resistance? If we are talking with an African, we have an African, how we can see how to give power to those elements that we know that will be critical according to your culture and your life to be stronger.
I think it will depend on what is being targeted. If you're targeting the discussion we are talking about now, death and dying, if the element is dangerous, for example, if somebody dies of Ebola or COVID-19, for example, if it's confirmed that there is very high risk of post-human transmission, and you say, look, the practice of washing the dead, because that was established in Ebola, the practice of washing the dead was very dangerous. It came to a time that the people in West Africa knew that that practice was dangerous and shouldn't be done. So it is very easy to change a thing that the people have seen that the continuing in it will mean a lot of risk to them. That's number one. Number two, if it's something that threatens their understanding of economy, for example, agriculture, maybe people think that for them to have good yields, good rainfall, they need to carry out certain practices. If those practices are not dangerous to their existence, I do not think there's any need to change it. But if it's, for example, you mean to have good yield, you have to kill somebody, it is very easy to teach them the possibilities of maybe fertilizers, for example, good irrigation system, so that they will understand it is not the spirit that brings the rain. Rain is an element of weather changes, and for you not to suffer too much, you can learn certain very simple irrigation methods. If again you want to effect a cultural change, it is always better to approach it from the opinion leaders, because in any African community, there are people who everybody seems to listen to. And you must approach those people at a point where they are receptive. You may not need to change their practice very suddenly. You may need to have to phase it out. A lot of the time, the idea to want to suddenly change it based on your own ideas that they are wrong brings a problem. Don't tell them they are wrong. Tell them this can be done in this manner with less resources and possibly more benefit, and try and see if you can do it in stages. I think once those philosophies, those approaches are done, you may be able to resistance. Because the problem is, once one person starts to resist, it may have a domino effect in the community. And it becomes very difficult to change it again, unless that person is not around. But if you approach it from, like lobbying, like when you lobby politicians, you know the people you want to talk to, you convince them, and the person brings it to the community level, and they give you opportunity to explain to them, you might be able to get more sources out of it. It's a complicated scenario, but engagement and re-engagement is the key.
¿Alguna pregunta más? Any other question?
Bueno, yo también tenía interés en preguntarle también que si ellos dentro de su percepción, o sea, piensan que perder la vida no es algo importante. ¿Para ellos la vida no es importante?
So she asked that your cultural perception, if life is so relevant as we take it, or do you think, or in a general manner, life is not so important? It's because of this, probably these three, ¿no? Esos tres, ¿no? Porque como hay oportunidad de volver, los ancestros,
Claro,
entonces estar
sí,
vivo,
sí.
claro, queda muy
Entonces,
repartido conceptualmente. La vida está muy, ¿no? You have a life that
claro.
takes 3 periods. Like a soul, that being living, and then the Walking Dead, that is for us is a movie, but we don't believe that. We think, oh, Walking Dead is a movie, but for you it's a reality. So it means that your lifespan is like more wider. So maybe how much relevant then is life? How much relevant is life when we are talking about life?
You know, there is an African parable that says that life is like a marketplace. In a marketplace, everybody comes with their wares to trade. And if I come with a few clothes to sell and I sell them earlier than you who brought so many things, I go back home. All right? So they say that everybody comes to life to do something, and depending on when you finish, you go back. The African belief, if you look at the 3 selfhood that I mentioned, is like a circle. It's like this life is just a phase. That's in that circle. But they expect at the same time that you should grow old. That is why if somebody dies early in Africa, people think, oh, something was wrong. Either the spirits were angry or there was witchcrafty and all that, because it is expected that you should have lived very old. I don't know where that impression is gotten. And once you grow old and you die, you transit to the ancestral stage. Yeah. And if you think you still want to come back, then you reincarnate and get born again. So it's like an energy system that is completely looped in itself. I tell you a simple story. When I was quite young, I still had my grandparents alive. And my grandmother told me, you know, as a little boy of about 10, and said, oh, you see that old woman over there? She was your wife when you were in the world before. Do you get it? Because they believe that I must have reincarnated back, and that I came so early, so the wife I had before was still living. You know, and I laughed. Even as a boy of 10, it was funny to me. Of course, I didn't believe that, but the belief was so strong. You know, in Africa, they used to do, for example, the birthmarks on bodies. Some people, when somebody dies, they get a hot metal and mark a part of the body. And they said that if it comes back again, you will see the birthmark there. Yeah. So if, for example, you had marked the lap of somebody as a corpse, and you had a baby that was born in the family with a mole on the lap, it is assumed that, oh, it has come back to life. Okay? So the issue of life for the African is a circle. So it depends at which point you are operating in.
I will just translate very shortly. Sara ha preguntado si la vida para alguien africano es tan importante como es para muchos de nosotros, ¿no? El concepto como hay un ciclo de 3 pasos, ¿no? Que es el alma que se encarna en alguien, luego tú vives y luego transitas y te conviertes en los ancestros que van vigilando toda la familia, generación tras generación. Pues entonces el concepto de vivo en un periodo concreto, pues a lo mejor no tiene tanto valor como para nosotros, donde todo está centrado en esa parte viviente, ¿no? Y yo he comentado incluso que como ellos hablan de los muertos vivientes, como alguien que sí que existe, porque serían como las ánimas del purgatorio que aún transita, pero para nosotros es una película, hay una serie de televisión que se llama así, pero para ellos es realidad. Entonces él ha contestado, bueno, ha contado varias cosas, hay como 4 cosas, ¿no? La primera es que hay una leyenda, una tradición cultural que dicen que la vida es como ir al mercado. Tú vas al mercado con cosas con las que vas a hacer un trueque, vas a vender algo. Entonces tú llevas tus cosas para hacer un trueque y haces tu negocio. Y el negocio tienes que hacerlo bien hecho. Entonces, si tú haces un negocio demasiado rápido, pues entonces, ¿qué pasa? Que te vas a casa antes de hora. Entonces, se espera que uno haga su tiempo de negocio en el mercado sea el más largo posible para sacar de esa venta lo mejor posible. De manera que la vida, cuando se precipita mucho, la gente piensa, bueno, estos son los ancestros que han visto que lo hacía mal y le han reclamado que vuelva pronto porque están malgastando esa oportunidad y tal y cual. ¿No? Eso ha sido el concepto de mercado y que estamos aquí para un objetivo, lo que se llama la misión, ¿no? De nuestra vida. La segunda, entonces, he explicado un ejemplo que iba a interrumpir ahí para explicar, pero como he visto que se iba muy fluido, ya no me ha creído. El segundo ejemplo que ha puesto ha sido de que su madre, en un momento determinado, como él nació por lo visto prematuro o algo así, bueno, no entendí muy bien qué refería, pero que ha llegado muy rápido, le dijo, ¿ves a esa señora de allí? Dijo, sí. Dice, esta era tu mujer en la otra vida. Dice, perdona. Dice, claro, llegaste tan rápido que ahora está viva. Entonces ha hecho la broma esta conforme esa persona que había vivido con él la otra vida, él había muerto y vuelto y aún no le había dado tiempo a ella de como a morirse, ¿no? Porque había el ciclo de 3 vidas que ellos tienen había ido muy rápido. Y luego, pues, esta parte aquí me ha puesto no sé, me ha puesto aquí una letra que no entiendo lo que me apunto yo mismo. Bueno, sobre todo esa parte de hacer 3 pasos, ¿no? Del tránsito, que está muy cuidado y en el fondo para ellos la vida es un círculo, ¿no? Porque tú eres un alma que se coloca en alguien, ese alguien vive y luego ese alguien transita y se va, pero forma parte del ancestro hasta que se vuelve a colocar. Y entonces eso sí, la marca de nacimiento. Que eso también lo he oído yo de gente que ha muerto, ¿no? Eso lo he oído yo en accidentes, ¿no? Que cuando alguien muere, de forma un poquito antes de hora o lo que sea, se le hace una marca porque se considera que esa persona todavía tiene que volver porque lo que hizo no estuvo acabado, su misión no estaba acabada. Entonces se le hace una marca con un metal para que entonces cuando vuelva a nacer puedan identificar a un bebé que lleva esa marca. Yo esto lo he oído de los animistas cuando hablan de la reencarnación de niños cuando ha habido una muerte. Ha habido un familiar que ha muerto y en la familia nace otro niño, entonces a lo mejor lleva una marca, ¿no? Dice, mira, no sé qué. Pero hay una que es un poquito más tenebrosa, que es que cuando alguien muere de un accidente, si el accidente fue, yo qué sé, le hizo daño en un brazo, hay una persona que nace y tiene daño en el brazo. ¿No? Entonces esa es la reencarnación, ¿no? Entonces un poco liga con lo que él ha dicho antes también de los órganos que había que sacarlos para que en la siguiente vida no estuvieran ya enfermos. Y eso también lo he oído yo en de niños que nacen con alguna enfermedad infantil, que es porque la traen de la vida anterior. I was just explaining this that also I have heard about here in Europe. I mean in Europe in a sense that is not so influenced by religion, because not in the religion, but on the culture, that somebody dies by an accident, and the accident, let's say, hurt an arm. Somebody gets born with a problem in an arm. So this problem is inherited because the soul brought the problem, and these birth marks, or that you say that are being searched for to identify is somebody that came again. And yes.
Yeah.
Y una cosa, Lidia, y ya te dejo. Hay una cosa que me llama mucho la atención y es que no sufre una madre cuando pierde a su niño.
No, a question that is very difficult for us to assume or perceive is how much it's not a maternal suffering when there is a loss of a child, because this is something that for us is like because most of us, we have one child or very few, so we are not used. Our 2 or 3 generations before, yes, because they had a lot, but so we are, I mean, how is that? It's not that we want to know, but I mean, it's some clues, some clues, how they.
You see, like I said before, it is expected that if somebody is born in Africa, he grows old. Therefore, when death occurs in children, it is surprising, and they try to look for a reason for it. Sometimes the reasons are to suit themselves. For example, for a long time, when we didn't know about sickle cell disease and children were dying from a particular family, maybe they had a sickle cell child. Within 2-3 years, the child dies. They have another one, or luckily see a sickle cell child, they keep dying. The belief was that the woman or the family was having spiritual babies who didn't want to stay, but they were unlucky either because they have not done something right, and so there was this reincarnation of the same spiritual babies, and so they were coming, staying a short while, and going back. In that case, the family may be able to cope and say, okay, it is not our fault, it's spiritual babies, but why are we having spiritual babies, and they work on it. In others, if the child is possibly 1 out of 10, the sense of loss will be lesser, particularly lesser for the man, not the woman. The woman always feels the sense of loss. But I also do know that in northern Nigeria, for example, people say because of the religious belief, they are likely to accept losses more than other people under the guise that, oh, God gave and God has taken, and so just deal with it. In other parts, the grief, the sense of loss is more acute. But again, some people think that, okay, if it's a child, the child has gone back early, rather than if it's an elderly person with responsibilities. So there is not a clear-cut loss sense across, I'm speaking from Nigeria especially now, rather than the whole of Africa. So they may not, yes, the point you raised may be important. A family that has 6 children and loses 1 will possibly cope better than a family that had 1 and lost the 1. That's why I say it.
Os ha explicado un concepto que es el de los spiritual babies, los bebés espirituales que llegan y se van enseguida. Y es como algo recurrente porque es un alma que vino para ser bebé, completa un periodo y se va. Pero a lo mejor tiene que volver a volver porque necesita volver a ser bebé un poquito tiempo más. Pero este concepto de bebés espiritual, que tampoco lo he acabado de comprender mucho en su totalidad, pero quiero decir que es como un alma que se reencarna y que transita muy poco tiempo en la Tierra. Entonces ellos tienen ese concepto para esas circunstancias maternales tan duras de perder un bebé pequeño, y que obviamente cuando hay una familia que tiene una estructura familiar más amplia de 6 hijos es más fácil de sobrellevar el duelo que cuando es solo una, ¿no? Y luego ha estado haciendo esto. Entonces hay otra frase que para ellos es bastante común, que en esas circunstancias, que es Dios nos lo dio y Dios nos lo quita. Es como si fuera algo que está cedido por alguien divino, como si fuera te lo ofrece, pero igual que te lo ofrece al momento te lo quita, ¿no? Entonces, pero lo delegan a que no haya una causa. Y eso sobre todo es porque el conocimiento que se tenía de enfermedades que se heredan, etcétera, etcétera, pues está bastante restringido. Entonces se formuló explicaciones así un poquito más espirituales para que ahora que se sabe que a lo mejor hay aspectos pues, que justifican, ¿no? Pues la muerte infantil en una determinada situación, pues a nivel cultural se respondía de esta manera, ¿no? Laura tiene también una pregunta. No hace falta que sea corto, puede ser tan largo. Yo digo corto para decirlo yo, pero tú explicas algo lo que merezcas, por favor. Ya tienes.
tengo un comentario muy breve. Well, thank you, Efosa. Thank you very much. It's very interesting. This, I mean, Mexico and Africa has a lot of, you know, in between, because my culture believes that when you go on the cemetery, the people is there. The people is there. Even in Mexico, every year we have in November, in the first days of November, we go every day with flowers and with food, no? The food that the people who dies prefer, the, you know, beverage, and if it's a kid, balloons, colors, you know, and you go and sleep over there. You sleep in the cemetery, and then you speak with them. You speak with them, and you spend 2 days over there, and then it's like, you know, like a medicine for the soul. In Mexico, it's very strong, this, and I think, because I hear you to say that you are singing and dancing and everything, and we go with mariachi over there. We go with the mariachi and we sing over there. So every year is like to have a meeting with them. It's very strong over here, and I think it's like in Africa, it's similar. I think. Thanks for everything, Efosa. It's gorgeous. This is gorgeous. Thank you, Lidia.
Thank you. Laura, ¿lo explicas tú mismo en castellano y así compartimos?
Sí, gracias. Le explicaba yo que México tiene algo muy similar con África, porque yo escuchaba a Efosa decir que cantan y bailan. Y aquí lo hacemos igual. Cada año, en los primeros días de noviembre, vamos al cementerio siempre y estamos con la persona que falleció, llevamos la comida favorita, la bebida favorita de la persona, se las dejamos ahí, durante 2 días dormimos allí, hablamos con ellos y les llevamos mariachi. Cantamos y bailamos y sabemos que ahí está la mamá, el papá, el hijo. Cuando se trata del Día del Niño está lleno de globos, todo el cementerio, y es una cosa impactante, o sea, cómo la cultura toma ese estilo de esperanza de que todavía hay un pedacito de ellos aquí y que nos escuchan. Eso es muy similar a lo que ellos hacen también. Gracias a todos, gracias. Gracias.
Yeah. Yes, I think we can also. I just was taking a picture here of the screen. Any other question? Or Virginia, that you are in the social part.
Yeah. Okay. Hi, Efosa. Efosa, so it's a psychosocial, psychocultural construction that goes from generation to generation. It's important for the mental health. Efosa?
Sí.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think for us, it was like you were making the sentence as a statement, not as a question. Nos ha parecido que es que afirmabas ya esta reflexión, ¿no? De que esas tradiciones culturales que pasan es algo que forma parte de los rituales para mantener una buena salud física y mental, ¿no? So the question was, la pregunta en concreto era cómo, sí, porque ha parecido más que explicabas tú.
Yeah. Okay, the question, you talk about not everyone has access for psychosocial support. What happened with the COVID? What happened with the Ebola? Because Ebola, April finished, they closed the Ebola. Now, COVID. What happened with the psychological support?
Is it I think the truth of the matter is psychosocial support in Africa is very weak. It is weak. There are no clear-cut institutions in most of Africa, maybe a little bit in South Africa, that deals with psychosocial support for things like this. The problem with Ebola was so widespread that it began to challenge certain people to look at what was going on. Remember, Ebola was thought to be a West African problem, and before you know it, it was spreading to Europe and America. And so a lot of the support that came in terms of psychosocial support and understanding the problem with the local communities actually came from international NGOs and others. And they understood that these people needed psychosocial support. And unfortunately, these are schemes that just comes in, and before you know it, it's gone. For COVID now, that psychosocial support, even in my country, Nigeria, isn't there. The disease in itself goes with a lot of fear, and those who are affected develop a lot of fear. And I do not think, from my own knowledge, if there is enough mental support even for the patients, let alone the bereaved. Therefore, this is an environment, or this is a continent where the issue of psychosocial support is not very strong, unfortunately. It's not. A lot of people get those support from their families. Now, the problem is, with what is going on with COVID, the immediately bereaved in Africa get a lot of support from family members. I used to say that if I would rather be bereaved in Africa than be bereaved in Europe or America. The reason is, if you're bereaved here, you're going to have so many people coming to live with you for a while. You know, family members will come, friends will come, they'll stay with you, because we think that the widow or the widower must be protected. People stay there, and while they're staying there, they help you deal with a lot of things. You have people to talk with, you have people to help you, and all that. Unlike in developed world, that may not be so. There are not many people that will be with you, because everybody is up and about doing one thing or the other. But now with COVID, the community is in distress. The bereaved is in distress. So even the psychosocial support you ordinarily would have gotten from members of your family or community are now lacking. And government has no plan in place to help in all of that. So it's a double tragedy for people that are bereaved with COVID, for example, with contagion. Because we are not sure if the widow has the disease. We don't want to go there and be infected, so we can't even support the widow, for example. And government does not have a systemic arrangement to support them. So it's a big problem, it's not there. Did you get it, Virginia?
Yes, but the voice was very low. But Virginia, ¿quieres ser tú la que haga el resumen, quizás? Lo hago yo como quieras. No, me lo hago muy cortito.
Sí, es que tengo problemas con el internet.
Ah, bueno, no, pues lo hago yo, si quieres. Bueno, ha hecho la pregunta de Virginia, que yo está en la parte social del CENIT en Panamá, era cuál es el apoyo psicosocial que puede ofrecer las instituciones, ¿no?, a la población. Entonces, Efosa, resumiendo, lo que ha hecho es una valoración de lo que ha pasado con el ébola, lo que ha pasado ahora, y que, claro, él siempre dice que si te tienes que morir o tienes que estar en una situación muy grave, siempre es mejor estar en África que estar en Europa o en Estados Unidos. Él tiene familia en España, en Tudela. Y dice, ¿por qué? Dice, porque aquí la gente en África te viene a ver, te cuida, te está al lado hasta, ¿no? O sea, es viuda, te acompaña. ¿Qué ha pasado con el COVID? Que esto ahora se ha roto. Es decir, ahora las viudas que están, las personas que se han quedado viudas, como nadie sabe si están infectadas, pues ahora hay como un medio terrible para hacer algo que forma parte de ellos. Y esto es algo que es nuevo, que antes en el ébola no había pasado. y que ahora, como no hay unas directrices muy claras, ¿no? En las diapositivas ha puesto de que no estaba claro si los muertos todavía infectaban o no, etcétera, etcétera, pues que esto está generando un problema, porque la directriz es, como no se sabe, pues ahora nadie se acerca. De hecho, aquí también está pasando así, o sea, cuando alguien está enfermo, no quiere que vayas, pero es que la gente ahora también, incluso hay gente que ha pedido que no se sepa que ha tenido el COVID, porque entonces a la gente se les aparta, ¿no? Porque, sí. Here in Spain, we got some people that got infected, and now there is like a general comment, not official, I think, but between the people that says that those that got COVID don't say anything because don't want the others to put a distance.
Es como realmente, es como si al mundo lo estuviésemos zarandeando, porque realmente, ahora con lo que decíamos aquí, ¿no? Aquí en Barcelona, el hecho de poder detectar a alguien de COVID y que van a poder, si detectan a alguien de COVID, van a saber qué 7 personas están más cercanas, esas 7 personas las van a seguir. Luego, o sea, que se hace como sí, ¿no? Es muy peliagudo, no sé dónde vamos tampoco, ¿eh? Es decir, por un lado, se entiende que se haga la prevención, pero por otro lado también la sensación de falta de libertad o de que te están condicionando mucho la libertad, también y a mí, es un poco la sensación de wow, porque te ponen esa tesitura igual que o economía o salud, ¿no? Y ahora te ponen o libertad o salud. Y claro, hablan de valores que son muy importantes. Entonces, te están haciendo como elegir cuando creo que tiene que haber alguna otra forma de poder salvaguardar la libertad, ¿no? y cuidar la salud. No sé, aquí también se está cuestionando. Es difícil, ¿eh? Es difícil, porque además la tesitura es que si eliges libertad, no eres buena persona, ¿no? Es que quedas como que no eres buena persona. Si eliges salud, tienes la sensación de que te están poniendo en una fila y no te salgas de la fila. Eso me parece como que hay muy poco libre albedrío. Es como la sensación de que se ponga de manifiesto que somos sociedades infantiles. Por lo menos yo hablo de esta, es decir, pero la sensación es esta, es decir, ojo, que nos están poniendo como si no fuésemos personas adultas. Hay un punto aquí de que se queda de manifiesto, yo creo que es lo que está pasando, ¿no? Se remueve el mundo y se está poniendo lo que no queríamos ver, se está viendo todo. Entonces, es como poner de manifiesto que no hay una confianza realmente en uno mismo o en el de al lado. O sea, que creo que tenemos este problema de salud, pero creo que hay un problema o unas corrientes por abajo que hablan de muchas otras cosas, de valores, de dónde quedamos como personas adultas. Sí, no sé, a mí me está pareciendo muy interesante en el hecho de la removida, la gran removida, también el hecho de no sé dónde vamos, esta parte de incertidumbre, ¿no? Siento que estamos todos conectados, esto sí, por el virus, mal rollo, pero estamos todos conectados. Esto también no sé. Entonces es como que yo siempre intento sacarle provecho y yo digo, bueno, algo bueno hay que sacar de todo esto, ¿no? Porque realmente estamos muy conectados. No sé, simplemente son reflexiones en voz alta, pero wow. Y creo que es muy importante dónde nos coloquemos. Esto sí que la sensación de apelemos a lo profundo del ser humano, porque va a hacer que la balanza se decante hacia un lado o hacia otro. Porque creo que sí que estamos en un momento de cambio. Entonces, wow, hay que estar con los ojos bien abiertos. Bien abiertos. Es un poco la sensación. Bueno, ya está. Muchas gracias.
I will summarize. Patricia said that it's like the wall is shaken. and then that there is a lot of emergence of new problems, and one of them is that in here the people that got the disease will be monitored, the person and 7 persons around, the 7 people that were close related. So then you are losing your liberty, your freedom, because they are going to follow you and those people that are related to you. And then it's like they ask you now, instead of asking between economy and health, is asking about freedom and health. And this is life at the same time. So it's like they treat us as like a child. It's a childhood society, because they are making decisions for us. It looks like they don't trust us, because she says it's like they don't have a confidence on our own responsibility, and that we don't feel confident on the other's responsibility. So we have to follow, because there is no confidence, like if we were a child. And she also says that this is this situation makes us to make a very deep reflections about which is the moment we are living, and that because we are now, she also says that we are very much connected now because of COVID, and that is this situation is like we have to make a strong a deep reflection, because it's like a balance, and we have to say in which part we are going to decide to be, we want to be, if we just want to be in one side or another. And it's for sure, she says, and a statement is a moment of change. And so it's a moment when this deep reflection has to be done properly, because it's the time to do them. And mostly because there are emergence of new questions that were not here before. I think que lo he resumido lo que puedes decirme.
Gracias, Lidia. Está claro que me voy a poner a inglés también.
I think that, Yasmin, tenías preguntas.
Ivana, nos ponemos juntas, Ivana.
Me too, because I understand the English, but a little.
Yasmin is from Mexico, but she is married with Catalan guys, so she's now half and half.
I have a question. Is it true that somewhere in Africa, when a child is born, a song is sung to him, and when he dies, the same song is sung to him?
I don't know if it's the same song. Childbirth is a very joyful occasion in Africa. That is why, again, when there is absence of a child in a marriage in Africa, it can be really very traumatic. So it's usually a very joyful occasion. When death occurs, if it's a young person, it's usually more sad than if it's an old person. In fact, if a young person dies, everybody wears black. All family members wear black. It's different from if a very elderly person dies, where people celebrate. In Nigeria, they say they are celebrating a life well lived, because it's thought that the elderly person will more easily transcend to ancestors. Therefore, they will sing at burials. Sometimes the tone of the song reflects the level of grief. Whereas the song may be more sorrowful when it's a younger person, the environment is usually a bit quiet, more quiet, rather than if it's an elderly person, it's like, oh, this is a celebration that is well deserved. Possibly because, this is just thinking aloud now, that we are more sure that the elderly person will easily become an ancestor. Rather, the young person may possibly just have a rovering spirit, as if the spirit is rovering around. So to answer your question very sharply, at birth, there is a lot of joy and singing. At death, there is also singing. Joy would depend on the age of the dead.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Efosa. I am grateful for your presentation. Very interesting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice to see you.
Voy a hacer un resumen. Yasmín ha preguntado si sabía o podía referir a una tradición que ha escuchado sobre África, de que cuando nace un niño se le pone una canción y esa canción se pone cuando esa persona muere o cuando ese niño muere. No, cuando esa persona muere se vuelve a poner la misma canción. Entonces él dice que esto como tal no lo sabe ubicar, si es que existe, pero sí que sabe que los nacimientos son siempre ocasiones muy celebradas. El nacimiento de un bebé es algo muy celebrado y por tanto también cuando se va, a pesar de aquello que hemos dicho antes, también hay mucho dolor porque como no puede trascender, no puede hacer la vida y todo esto, pues entonces representa que ha quedado truncado y tal. Entonces dice que incluso hay una diferencia importante en lo que tiene que ver con el concepto de canciones y música acompañando a la muerte en función de la edad. Cuando se trata de una persona joven que por tanto su vida ha quedado truncada, la gente acostumbra a vestir de negro y son ceremonias muy silenciosas porque se considera que esta alma todavía tiene que volver y estará transitando una temporada y no ha resuelto. Mientras que si es una persona mayor es muchísimo más habitual que en lugar de estar en esa circunstancia se haga una ceremonia en la que hay una celebración de su vida. Entonces ellos dicen, celebran la vida porque consideran primero que ha sido una persona que por edad haya tenido más oportunidades de haber tenido, dicen, celebramos la vida bien vivida. Dicen, celebramos la vida bien vivida, porque consideran que hay más oportunidades de que eso haya pasado así y se puede verificar además porque hay esa experiencia vivida con él, porque es más fácil que por tanto trascienda a ese nivel de ancestros que para ellos es tan importante en lugar de tener que reencarnarse para volver a acabar cosas pendientes. Y entonces en las ceremonias, esas son ceremonias que son bastante animosas en el sentido de que se canta y los tonos en las canciones que se usan dan imagen también del nivel de dolor que se siente por esa pérdida. Y si son muy graves, pues a lo mejor es porque es un poquito más joven, que no es, de los viejos no es el más viejo. En cambio, el nivel de grave, ¿no? de la melodía. Hasta el punto que si es joven y es una muerte truncada, se está en silencio, casi no hay canciones, no se canta, hay mucho silencio, ¿no? Pero aparte de la parte de vestida. Yo sé, por ejemplo, también que en Oriente, en la India se viste de blanco porque representa que es un alma que trasciende. Entonces ahí hay la ropa en blanco, ¿no?
No, Lydia, these ceremonies are very crucial. I give you, in my tribe, in Nigeria, for example, if, for example...
Valentina has to go.
Oh, okay.
Bye-bye, Efosa. Thank you very much.
Bye, Virginia.
Sí.
Okay,
thank you. Bye.
Yeah, nice to talk to you, Virginia. But I think you'll love this story because it's to emphasize the importance of these ceremonies. If, for example, a father dies and the son did not perform these ceremonies, if the son dies later, his own son cannot bury the father until he does the ceremony for the grandfather. All right? Because the impression is that unless you do the ceremony for your grandfather to allow his passage through the rites, you cannot do that for your father. You see, so the ceremonies are very important to the African community concerned.
Dice Efosa que las ceremonias son muy importantes porque consideran, por ejemplo, si muere un padre, un abuelo, y su hijo no tiene oportunidad de hacer una ceremonia, enterrarle, hacer el funeral con todos los rituales, y porque él muere también. Entonces el nieto no puede enterrar a su padre hasta que no se ha hecho la ceremonia del abuelo, porque se considera que tiene que haber este orden de trascendencia hacia los ancestros. Entonces, antes de enterrar a su propio padre y hacer la ceremonia, tiene que cumplir con el entierro y ceremonia del abuelo, para que así se cumpla la parte esta de rituales que tiene que ver con ascender y convertirse en ancestros de familiares, ¿no? Porque se le da muchísima importancia al concepto al concepto de que hay una familia en ese otro mundo que está ahí para nosotros. Entonces hay que hacerlo bien, ¿no? Yes. So
Yeah.
it's 9 o'clock. I thank you so much, Efosa, and also Ismael, for the chance to have you here, for the chance to
Like a bird on a tree.
close to your culture and to
I'm just
to
sitting
have,
here.
I always say that
I got time.
one can always talk about others,
It's
but
clear
you
to
need to
see
listen to the others to get the real
from
feeling
up
and
here.
to know exactly
The
all
world
the
seems
dimensions
small.
of that concept. And
We
this
can
today has
sit
been an important day for all of us
together.
because of the
Yeah.
difficulties.
It's so
I really
beautiful.
enjoyed Efosa's
You and
presentation.
me.
Like this, okay?
But you have to get in contact with
meant
each
to
other to
be.
make
Yes.
some work.
In the great
Yeah. Because my
outdoors.
sister schooled in Benue in Mourning.
Forever free.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, she's schooled at the FGCC. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Lovely. Perfect.
Thanks, Dr.
Thank you very much, Dr. Efosa, Ismael. I have to go.
Thank you.
Bye, Lydia. Good night.
Sometimes you need to go.
Goodbye.
Thank you so much.
Take a step back
Bye. Bye.
to see the truth.